You're listening to Cultivation Elevated, hosted by Michael Williamson, where we discuss vertical farming and the future of cannabis and food production. You'll be learning key insights for vertical farming success from leading industry operators, growers, and executives. If you're a grower or owner looking to optimize your existing or new indoor cultivation facility, or anyone looking to cultivate more in less space, we've got you covered. Cultivation Elevated, sponsored by Pip Horticulture.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cultivation Elevated, sponsored by Pip Horticulture, where we discuss all things vertical farming and operations for cannabis and food crops. My name is Michael Williamson, and I'm here in Cambridge, Maryland, at the premier facility, Culta. And I'm joined today by Jay Bouton, Senior Director of Culta.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. To get started a little bit, can you kind of tell me a little bit about the name Culta and kind of how that came to be?
Yeah, so Culta, kind of has a multi-headed meaning, but really the main part that we were focusing on was culture, and bringing the cannabis culture and keeping the cannabis culture in the forefront of pretty much everything that we do as a company.
And the cannabis culture, it really stems a lot from the West Coast and even in some parts of Colorado and some of those earlier states. And so it seems like that's a pretty critical thing and not exactly an easy thing to bring into an East Coast kind of new state with less of a history with legal cannabis.
Yeah, out West, it's much more open and easygoing as far as cannabis goes. So to come out here where people have been much tighter to the chest with, their past cannabis consumption, it's a little more difficult to kind of make people realize that this is a legal industry that, we are able to flourish in, and you don't have to be ashamed of it or hide behind a wall anymore, that, we're able to really take it and run.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get on a plane and head west and how different the vibe feels around cannabis. And and I grew up on the East Coast and I lived on the West Coast, and yeah, it was almost like a fresh breath of air. But now we're seeing that fresh breath of air kind of shift to the East Coast, and yeah, it's awesome that you guys are focusing on cannabis culture as a staple in what you do every day.
Yeah, there's a lot of multi-state operators that are in Maryland specifically, and we really just kind of want to combat kind of that larger feeling of not appreciating the plant or not really being there for what the plant is there for, and we want to just represent the plant and cannabis for really what we feel it's there for.
Can you describe a little bit about kind of how the application process went here? This is a limited license state. Can you maybe explain what that means a little bit?
Yeah, I think in 2015 is when that process was going, 2014 and 15, and I want to say there was about 150 applicants overall that was able to, Maryland was only awarding 15 cultivation licenses, 15 processing licenses, and 99 dispensary licenses. And so, if you do the math on that, it was extremely competitive, and it was all merit-based, lots of different groups from around the nation, around the state, really trying to make their space. But
yeah, it's a bit of a golden ticket, huh?
Yeah, out here, definitely.
And so merit-based means that you essentially had to fill out different questions on the application that were pretty extensive, and they were basically graded, correct? So it was like you were getting scored?
Yeah, so I think what makes Maryland unique was that basically they graded us off of our internal SOPs. So basically we presented them with, seed to sale, everything that we felt needed to happen in our facility to get that medicine out. And after they took a look at everybody, what they said they would do on a day-to-day basis and how they would get it there, they looked at what our infrastructure was and realized that we were talking a big game and able to follow through.
Yeah, you actually knew what you were talking about. I imagine providing SOPs prior to having an operation is very difficult. So it seems like a lot of people that won licenses most likely had some previous experience or some people on their team that, come from some other licensed states.
Yeah, one of my good friends, Matt Bickle Consulting, he was part of our team that helped us get our license here, and really his knowledge in other states on a large scale and how to do things correctly was one of our biggest reasons that we we're able to do so well and really hit the ground running here. So.
Awesome. And so now there's how many of those 15 licenses, or I guess which license did you guys end up getting? You clearly got cultivation, so you were literally in the top 10% out of the people that tried, which is incredible. But you also got manufacturing?
Yeah, and we got the dispensary as well. So when the first licenses were awarded, we were one of 4 people to be vertically integrated to begin with. I believe that number is probably 6 or 7 by now, if not more. But to begin with, we were one of the very few that was able to kind of control our destiny and grow, process, and distribute all of our own medicine in the way we felt the best.
For someone who's not familiar with vertical integration, can you explain a little bit more about all the supply chain components to something like that?
In Maryland, there's no distribution license, and so it's a little bit different than some other states, but basically it just means that, yes, we're able to grow everything here in-house. If we need to extract anything, we can literally transfer it right through one door, next door into our lab, and then anything that is, test passed, finished, and packaged, we're able to then send right to our dispensary. We also feed, 90 of the 99 dispensaries in the state as well, so it's just a constant rotation of where we're sending our medicine to.
And you guys have a flagship dispensary in Baltimore as well?
Yeah, we're right there on Key Highway, right down in Fed Hill, so right in the Inner Harbor. I would think it's it's the most beautiful area to have a dispensary in Baltimore. We're right on the water. You're looking right into the city. The Fed Hill has a really cool history and a really beautiful park that you can go up on top and kind of see the history there. So we feel lucky about what we were able to get ourselves there too.
Yeah, and can you speaking of really cool areas, the buildings that I've toured today are really cool and they have a rich history. Can you highlight or kind of paint the picture for listeners a little bit on the infrastructure and maybe some of the history of the building prior to its current use?
Yeah, so the building that we are currently occupying is one of the 4 buildings that still stand of the Phillips Seafood Packing House. So basically there was, I don't know how many acres it took up, but there was 12,000 workers here, in the early 1900s. Until about 1970 is when it died. And so, this was Bumblebee Tuna Factory. This was just massive fishing cannery, basically. We have the second deepest port behind Baltimore in the state of Maryland. So we were able to, to have this massive manufacturing presence here. But then in the 70s, everything left, went to Europe to start the canning over there, I guess. And basically, Cambridge has been not doing a whole lot on the industry side until then. So basically, we were able to come in, find these awesome buildings that are still being used in various reasons. And
was there a pretty good amount of power available because of their previous use?
There was, but at the same time, we have
Not enough.
Yeah,
It's
it's never enough. And over the last 5 years, we are constantly working with the city to help, give us more power, make it more efficient for everybody as well. But yeah, there's no such thing as enough power.
And when you guys landed at this location, a lot of that was driven by the fact that a lot of local municipalities essentially had like a moratorium saying, no, just because the state passed a law doesn't mean that the local municipality has to align with it. Yeah. And so a lot of places said no, but Cambridge said yes.
Yeah, we approached multiple other towns before coming to Cambridge, and every single one of those towns was not interested, no matter what we could say about an economic impact or bringing jobs or anything. Nothing mattered because cannabis had such a bad connotation to it. And we fully expected Cambridge to kind of have that same idea, but they understood that it's been 40 years that there's been nothing really new to come to town. It's a town of 12,000 people and everybody wants a good opportunity here, and there really wasn't anything to give them other than a couple other manufacturers. And so they were more than willing to work with us and to help really bring more jobs to the town.
Nice. And my understanding is you're one of the lead employers in the town?
Yeah, we're the second largest in town now, and as we keep on growing, I know we'll become number one. There's more opportunity that Culta can offer a lot of the people from Cambridge than the Hyatt or these other other companies. There's much more room for growth and for you're being educated every day at work, and we're growing the people just as much as we're growing the plants.
Yeah, amazing. What I've learned over the years is, especially with growers, is it seems like a lot of growers are relatively specialists. So they're like, I'm an indoor grower, or I'm a greenhouse grower, or I'm an outdoor grower, and you guys actually do all three here.
Yeah, so personally, I'm an indoor grower coming from Denver, and everything before that. And for the first 2 years, we only did indoor here, but 2019, we were able to start the first acre there. And so that's been, back to the education part and learning every day, getting to learn organic, large-scale outdoor cultivation compared to, single-tiered, double-tiered, whatever system you want inside. It's a completely different monster. I do think that the cultivators at Culta are probably a little more well-rounded. We keep our crews completely separate, but at the same time, the knowledge is passed around. Everybody is part of the team when it comes to the harvest. So I do think that being a grower at Culta, you're exposed to literally every system that is, being used right now.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And though you use on the outdoor stuff, you use all organic, amendments and soils. Because of some of the legal regulations, you're not actually allowed to call it organic per se, but you guys have another certification?
Yeah, federally, there's no organic certification for it, but...
for cannabis in general.
Exactly, but so it's the clean green certification. So it's the program that, somebody made because they knew that there was obviously organic cannabis being grown that would qualify for that under every other...
I remember that program in California. I can't remember the gentleman's name. I thought it was like Chris Van Hook or something like that. But I remember that program, and it was nice to know that there was at least an organization or somebody that cared enough to start the movement in that direction.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people that are 10 or 20 years older than me that have been doing it in California for a long time, and they've all said for years and years that organic sun-grown cannabis is no question the best. And in my experience, being an indoor grower, I've always liked the indoor flower more, but seeing what we're able to produce under the sun out here and seeing the, knowing that it's organic, knowing it's grown under the sun, it really does bring something that we can't do inside.
Do you notice like a depth of flavor? Is that one of the big kind of differentials?
Yeah, that's the big thing that's standing out to me more each year. I could be blindfolded in the middle of New Orleans and somebody would let me taste some of our flower that we grew and I would know it immediately that just from the flavor that was grown here. And, it just really does. I'm because I'm a good flavor person and I'm trying to pull that flavor out as a descriptor and I really can't, but there's something in all of our strains that are grown under the sun organically that has this really just a full flavor.
And so with being in Maryland, being on the coast, obviously getting very much all four seasons, the greenhouse is kind of dormant and the outdoor is dormant during, half of the year, 3/4 of the year.
I guess technically about half of the year.
Prepping, I imagine, and stuff for season.
Yeah, and we're testing right now soil temperatures for the beds inside of our crop protection, the Cravo, to see if potentially we could, maybe do another late season run for autoflower. We're always kind of looking to see what else we can do to kind of push the limits. And
can we talk about the Cravo a little bit? That was kind of a new thing for me, which is really unique. But if you're looking at it from a distance, you go, that's a greenhouse. But there's kind of some other stuff going on there. It's not quite a greenhouse, but can you explain the difference in that system?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a plain metal structure with 3 different layers of fabric on it, 2 different shade cloths and a full blackout curtain. And then it connects to our weather station so that it takes barometric pressures, it takes wind speeds, it knows leaf temperatures, soil temperatures, multiple different parameters that it'll take, and then you tell it, if it's over 8 miles per hour from the south, that the wind's coming in, then the south wall will close. the other 3 walls will stay open and allow that airflow to go. So it really just kind of...
It's like really fancy outdoor.
It is, yeah, and it's really cool if we have the same genetics in our full sun-grown fields, and then the same genetics under Cravo. The beauty of the flower on the protected side, it is obvious that, you know, protecting it from that 10-mile-an-hour plus wind, or that, you know, if maybe the sun is getting that hot that day, that maybe it'll shade it a little bit, and so you might sacrifice a little bit of yield doing certain things like that, you know, shading it when it's too much sun or whatever, but the beauty that comes from that is next level.
So it's essentially everything about a greenhouse except for either like a polycarbonate or a poly or a glass roof.
Yeah, and there's no supplemental lighting either.
Okay.
That's another part that, you know, we could add if we wanted to. It's not that the Cravo doesn't accept supplemental light. We haven't done that.
And then you guys are getting how many crops per year out of that setup?
So under Cravo, we'll get 2 crops basically. We'll get 1 acre of autoflower and 1 acre of full photo period.
And then you, in addition to the Cravo kind of hybrid greenhouse, you also have just straight outdoor in raised beds.
Yeah, so we'll have 2 acres spread over 3 different fields of raised beds, grassroots, fabric pots. You know, they're 4 years in now. The soil, the beds, everything is now, and it's, you know, gone through its 4th season of cultivating, and just getting better and better with each season.
And then as far as product goes, is outdoor product earmarked for extraction? Is Cravo economical flower, or how does that all get broken down?
So that's kind of the, you know, each season is gonna just environmentally, weather-wise, it's gonna offer us something different each year. And so the thing with indoor flower is we can plan for our product to go for as long as we want. You know, it's like we know we're gonna harvest this whole next year, but with outdoor, you know, we've gone through 2 hurricanes, we've gone through, you know, a drought, we've gone through 5 straight days of rain. So we have an idea of where everything's going to go, but you honestly kind of have to see how that season treats you before you can really decide, is this an extraction year? Is this a flower year? Initially growing on the shore here, we're 2 feet above, you know, above sea level, 90% humidity, 80% humidity. We're in the 90s, you know, all summer. And so people thought when we were growing our first acre that we were absolutely crazy. And internally we said maybe 10% of this flower will be of the quality, you know, to be sold as flower. We found out, you know, very quickly that these plants will thrive, you know, in this environment, no question. And so we were pleasantly surprised with how well.
Well, what's interesting when it doesn't have, you know, the big thing with a greenhouse is like the moment it's like almost putting plants in a Tupperware container, and, you know, and then all of a sudden you've got all that humidity building up, and depending on how tall the greenhouse structure is, it'll either hover on the crop, and it becomes this, you know, really intense management of just moving air as much as you can. But because you guys have kind of eliminated that ceiling, so to speak, and you have all that fresh air exchange coming from all directions, unless you have too much wind, then you can control that too. It eliminates a lot of that humidity buildup. But I guess also if it's 90% humidity outside, then
You're not going to escape it.
it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Cravo was basically, it was built to put and grow crops in extremely arid climates, really. So like Morocco, Mexico, Egypt, these places that literally couldn't grow a crop at all, you know, that can trap the humidity. So in a place that's extremely dry, then all of a sudden you want that to trap the humidity, and it'll cut down your temperatures as well. And so we're almost using the Cravo as like an almost opposite of that.
Because of where we're located and its like rich history with shipping and fishing and boating, I've always thought of like growers as kind of like captains of their boat. And I've always thought of indoor facilities kind of like a barge or a yacht. Like you can make strategic changes and it's a little bit more controlled. And I've always thought of greenhouses as like sailing a boat, like a sailboat, where, you know, you are, like you said, it depends on Mother Nature and what's happening outside, and you're real-time adjusting and doing things on the fly. And, you know, I've always found that greenhouse growing, it's interesting. It's simpler in some ways, but it's also a lot more technical than indoor cultivation.
Yeah, I mean, you're not dealing with HVAC in the same sense. It's more of like the air movement in that. But yeah, I like the Cravo in the way that it just, you don't rely on as many systems. You just rely on direction and.
Yeah, it's got a purist kind of component to it. So shifting gears to the indoor building that we're in now, and you've got multiple indoor buildings, correct?
Yeah, so we have 2 phases of indoor growth in our main building, and then we also have it's our support building to grow and veg everything for outdoor.
Okay.
But just as you said, the Cravo's empty for 6 months. Rather than that stay empty, we utilize that as being a veg and a flower room too.
So there's a seasonality to one of the buildings as well, and it kind of shifts. Yeah. You got a lot of moving parts and pieces here.
Yeah, and it's just it's kind of like the nose to tail thing. We want to use everything, make sure nothing's sitting there for too long. Just keep everything functioning.
Sounds like a really lean kind of mentality. It's great. What's the square footage on the building that we're in currently?
So the building that we're in right now is 36,000 square feet, and total canopy, not just in this building, also the building that we were just talking about, total we have 20,000 square feet of canopy. So 6,000 square feet over there, so about 14,000 square feet in this 36,000 square foot building.
And when you say canopy, is that flowering canopy or total canopy?
That's total canopy. 70% of that would be flower, I think, ish.
I know a lot of people who will be listening to the podcast can't see, but we're in your office, and you have a pretty incredible window in your office, but it doesn't lead to the outside, but it leads into one of your multi-tiered LED flower rooms, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, this definitely is the best window, the best view I could have asked for in an office, and so definitely one of the perks. But it's cool. You can kind of get an angle in here that you can't get in the room too. So we'll have our growers come up and kind of just take a look and verify that they're trellising correctly or that their canopy's being controlled in the right way. So it also kind of has a function.
Yeah, it's a unique perspective. So as far as the flowering rooms go in here, you have kind of a hybrid thing going on, right? You have a few HPS flowering rooms, and then you have a couple, and those are single tier. And then you also have the Pip Horticulture double stacks here, and it looks like Fluence LEDs, and I think you're running Train HVAC on this particular side.
Yeah, so in 2016, when we were making the initial investment for phase 1, the LEDs, at that time people said that you don't flower under LED, you're only supposed to veg under LED, and so when we were weighing that investment, it was just safer to us to say, okay, let's go with HPS, it's proven, and we'll wait and kind of see how this goes. Before I came here, I had already been doing double tiered LED, with Fluence and doing studies with them. So I knew that was the future, but the industry as a whole, it really took, I'd say, until about 2018 or 19 that it started being widely accepted. And still, I think there's still people that don't believe the LED phenomenon. But yeah, we have the HPS rooms because that was the safe bet in 2016. And we still like using them, honestly. There's certain strains that, obviously with double tiered, you don't have as much vertical height. So we're able to get some of our stretchier genetics there. And there's also, we're not 100% if it's a spectrum thing or what, but there's a couple strains that just perform better under the HPS. Very few, but the ones that do perform better under HPS do much better.
Or what's like the square foot of a flower room here? Are they all the same size?
They vary. Next door, we're about 1,500 square feet of canopy in each one, and in here we're just over 2,000. So not big differences, but yeah.
Enough with plant production scheduling to make sure you're paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, we basically have the facility broken into 2 halves, so it really does help the planning side of it. So we, the planning we keep separate, and then we combine them to kind of polyrhythm it. So it's basically we're harvesting every 3 weeks next door, harvesting every 3 weeks here, but you combine them, so it's every 10, 11 days, 9 to 11 days.
Yeah, what is about the average, is there like a maximum that you'll flower in terms of maturation time? I know you guys do a lot of stuff from seed originally, which we'll talk about in a minute, but if you have something that's a winner in your eyes, what's the cutoff date? it can be no longer than X amount of weeks in flower?
Yeah, so kind of back to like our 6 flower rooms, or really it's the 3 flower rooms. So planning wise, we do everything on a 9-week 9-week cycle. I think that's pretty standard. In my experience, most strains are already around that 63. You'll have your ones that are, done in your mid 50s, some that want to go forever, but I'd say at this point, especially with the genetics being being crossed so often, that I think flowering times are just really starting to to a point. But the 9-week flower cycle and being able to do all of our stage moves every 3 weeks just makes the planning seamless.
It's interesting because there's a few things that want to go 10, and it seems like from a commercial viability and financial standpoint, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then the end users or end medical patients, in this case, they're really not willing to pay more for something that needs to be flowered longer. So
that is probably the biggest issue right there, is that you could spend 2 extra weeks, 3 extra weeks flowering a strain, or doing putting in that extra work to bring something to the market that literally nobody else has, but that value isn't seen with everybody. But there are certain people that really appreciate that, but not enough that it makes it viable. As we keep on getting flower rooms and building more out, I am trying to figure out a way that we can maybe dedicate one to being a 10-week, or maybe even 11 if we get some great. But like, I would love to be able to bring that stuff to the market, in a responsible way, and also keep production going, obviously. But that's really the biggest missing piece is some of those late flowering sativas, I think.
And in the single-tiered flower, HPS flower rooms, you've got GGS benches. Is that what's in there? Yeah.
GGS rolling tables.
Yeah, it's actually a Pip subsidiary company as of this past year. So we were really happy to welcome them kind of into the Pip family. Typically, about how much percentage of canopy are you getting on that room? Do you know roughly, compared to the square footage space? You like how I asked you?
I'd say 50, just over 50.
50%?
Yeah, because we like to keep good aisles. The room itself is just under 3,000, and
Are they are they a mobile? Are they rolling benches or are they fixed leg?
Yeah, they're mobile. They roll side to side. It's that. As basic of a system as those GGS tables are, they're phenomenal. So they serve a great point.
So you're probably 750, 800 square feet of canopy, something like that in that space?
Yeah.
Okay. And then in the multi-tiered room, the rooms are, you said, 2,000 square feet? Or no, 1,000 square feet?
Yeah, I think they're about 12,000 or 1,200 square feet. And then, we're at 2,048 square feet of canopy in each room. So
that's what's interesting about going vertical, is maximizing cubic footprint, because I've got, I'm not against single-tiered HPS growing. I've seen some really incredible things. I've been there myself. But when you start to run the numbers, even if you're getting bigger numbers in terms of grams per square foot out of your single tier, when you look at the multi-tiered and being able to create space that physically didn't exist, even if the yields are slightly less, let's say, in the end, when you look at the total, HPS doesn't even come close. Are you seeing that here as well, or?
Yes, I mean, these rooms that we're looking back here, they've now been functioning for over 2 years, and kind of back to that daily education and growing, is we've been getting better those 2 years as well. And so in the beginning, we weren't seeing exactly this grams per square foot aligning. Some strains would, some wouldn't. At this point now that we've really got our crew dialed and the facility dialed, and the genetics and the nutrient, everything really homogenized, we're now seeing better results on the square footage basis out of these LED rooms too. So
really?
Yeah.
Nice.
So once you can kind of really dial in all of those things, the LED double stack, I don't think you're going to be sacrificing anything for that.
It's interesting. It's also interesting how, people who are in a new emerging state doing a startup, and they're like, all right, I've got a flagship facility. I've purchased the best in class equipment. I think I've got one of the best teams, or at least really strong leadership, and we're going to hire people up. It's not always a recipe for success right away. New environment, new team, commission building, train people, learn how to communicate as a cohesive group. It takes some time to dial things in. Sometimes when I look at some of these lofty financial pro formas for investors and things on other projects, it's like they just think they're going to get to this, like, we're crushing it on our first harvest and then we're just going to hockey stick from there. But really it's a little bit of a crawl before you can kind of run thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our indoor team at this point, every single person has been here for over a year, and that amount of time to come in every day and get better and better and better, that's really starting to show. A couple years ago during the kind of the COVID craziness, there was, turnover in every industry, all over the place. And so that was also right when we were expanding. And so new systems, training new employees on a regular basis, that's hard to really bring it all together and, trust everybody to go out, do everything that they should do, come back, it's been done. And at this point now that, everybody's been here, 13, 14, 15 months at least, it's just a night and day difference on, they come in and they're as good as any grower could be, at this point. And so that just makes every difference there.
So even though you guys, I think if you're listening, you're like, oh, 20,000 square feet canopy indoor, 3 acres outdoor, you sound like a big company. But the reality is you guys are a small, you guys almost have that kind of family feel here. You're not a multi-state operator. You're, and there's actually as I was talking to people here and I was asking where they're from, you've got a ton of Maryland natives here, but you guys are by all means a small business.
Yeah. I mean, I think, because I even am somewhat blinded sometimes in, thinking that we're large, but then, going and touring a couple of the other grows that are here in the state, seeing numbers, and seeing sales numbers and stuff, it's kind of humbling to know that, no matter how good or big we think we are, we're really, in the grand scheme, we're kind of a smaller middle ground company, but that also just allows us to really focus on what matters. And, we're not taking on everything under the sun. We're really trying to focus on what we do best.
Let's talk about that, because quality is something that everybody talks about, but now it's really becoming a forefront, because in these new states, you can almost grow anything in the first year and it'll sell. But then the evolving consumer, medical patient, they start to get a refined palate, or they start to experience elevated cannabis, and then they say, wait a minute, I'm paying the same amount for this stuff as I'm paying for this other stuff from this other group, and but this is so much better. And once you kind of realize that you've been kind of consuming, Bammer, for lack of better words, and then you kind of have this awakening moment of, aha, there's really no going back to the previous type. So you guys have been recognized for several awards that I can't remember now, but I remember Grower of the Year.
Yeah, we just got the Explore Maryland. They just released the awards last week. We got the Grower of the Year. We got the CBD Product of the Year for our strain, the Mango, which is a great, pretty much like a 1-to-1 CBD THC strain. And then what we're most proud about is the Workplace of the Year in the cannabis industry. So being Grower of the Year is awesome, having Product of the Year is awesome, but being recognized as, where the employees in Maryland would much rather be, that makes us as proud as anything.
That's the best, just when you're doing it right. And I mean, even myself as an ex-owner operator in the space, I was admiring some people that were doing some defoliation over here, and there was maybe 4 people on the Elevate platform system just working. 3 out of the 4 people, they were smiling. They were smiling while they were working diligently. They weren't goofing off and making jokes. I could physically see that they were smiling, and I was thinking, that's what you want to see. Like happy people, happy plants.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also, I always like to say, like wintertime too, outside here in Maryland at least, you can go weeks on end with not seeing much sun, cold wind, and so it's also just kind of that seasonal boost that helps everybody. That's one of the best parts of growing, is being able to come inside in the wintertime and you're in San Diego.
Tropical oasis. Yeah. I remember from our early days in Colorado, I would go into a grow. Sometimes I rode my bicycle because Colorado's kind of has that crazy weather thing going on, and then you'd be indoors and you can't see outdoors, of course, and then you'd be going to go leave it for the day and there'd be like a foot of snow on the ground.
Yeah, it's an escape from reality.
No, totally. I think it's something that isn't talked about enough, but it's, I don't know how much value that adds to a job, but it seems pretty significant in my eyes, where you can wear a t-shirt and have a sweat going and stuff like that. I also noticed that, everyone here is really on task. Sometimes I'll go into a facility and because there's cameras or new people kind of stop working and they start looking and they start asking questions, and everybody was just really on task, and that speaks really loudly to kind of your leadership style and kind of the expectations that have been set with your employees. So.
Yeah, and it's also we're lucky to have a few partners that have come through and helped kind of shine a spotlight on Culta before, and so it's also our cultivators are used to kind of working within those realms and knowing that it's part of a bigger picture, and they're not starstruck, and it's another day at work.
Now, on another award that you guys got that is actually quite unique, you don't hear about it enough, is the RMI Award.
Yeah, the Regional Manufacturing Institute of Maryland. So they're basically the large manufacturing association of the state, and they recognized us for energy consumption. And so basically, as we know, the industry is a massive hog on the infrastructure, and so it was another validating thing for us to know that the state recognized us on kind of leading the way for energy consumption and learning more about what we can do to help that.
Yeah, it's great that it's a focus. And you guys also did something really interesting with, was it Dartmouth?
Yeah, we had some students and a professor come out from Dartmouth this year. Basically, they have a whole course that's on radical facility redesign. And I think in Massachusetts, the industry takes up 1% of the power grid already. It's probably that way, in many states. Yeah, so when you think about one industry taking up 1% of the entire grid, it is pretty eye-opening. And so their whole mission is to learn, to figure out these different ways of, what have we always been doing here just because that's what you've always been doing, and what can we change in a way that would really help our consumption. So we're going to look at metering, every single thing in a room that is consuming power, your HVAC, your lights, your fans, every single thing there. And then breaking that down over one harvest, and then seeing the new metric that they want to start looking at is grams per kilowatt hour. So basically, how efficient was your facility in creating that biomass, which I think is a really interesting new way to kind of look at it that is never really been thought about from at least our, the grower side.
Oh, I think that's great. Let's shift gears a little bit into kind of how you got like genetics. And I remember Bickle from some previous projects, and we met out at Photo X in San Diego years ago. But I do see the consistent theme of starting with a lot of seeds. So
yeah, so we've always, at least Matt's thought is, if you're going to be creating a new facility in a new state, that your only way to really get out ahead and make a clean facility with your own genetics, is knowing good breeders, building relationships with them, and trying to bring in things that are unique to you. Sure. So yeah, we started out, in 2018, we had probably 70 strains popped from seed to start with out of the gate. And it took us about a year to really whittle through all of that. Obviously, we're trying to do our pheno-hunting quick and narrow down, but that big of a hunt kind of takes a minute.
Well, it's 70 times X, right? So it's probably a few thousand beans or something.
Exactly. And so...
and that's a few thousand seeds that you have to individually track and metric and all that stuff, and physically track and hold. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand what a daunting organizational task something like that is.
I mean, if you really are to break down the things that we do on a yearly basis, or anytime we do a big seed pop and a pheno track, a pheno hunt of that, that's one of the most daunting and most important, because one mislabeled pheno, all that work is gone, and so being thorough on that is huge. And actually this year was the first year that we were able to capture every single phenotype and get it into our tissue culture lab. So the redundancy we had and the safety net of knowing that every single phenotype that was in that facility or in our fields, we were able to go right back, find any single one of those winners, we can bring right back out when we need. So
for someone who maybe doesn't understand or has that pheno-hunting is a new word to them, can you kind of describe what a pheno-hunt kind of consists of and means?
Yeah, so I mean, the way I kind of look at it is, if you pop a pack of seeds, a pack of regular seeds, you're going to have some brothers and sisters. Some of them might be the milkman's, kid that you don't know how that expression got in there, and the others are identical. And so it's really just growing all of them out. Here in Maryland, or really, I guess, in any production facility, it doesn't matter if you think it's good. That's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is, back in the past, you'd pop a seed, and if it was awesome, you're so excited and you're going to keep growing that. But being good is one thing. It still needs to be production worthy. It still needs to be vigorous. It still needs to, veg in a certain time. If you have, some of those old like hash plants or Bubba Cushes that they're the slowest growers ever. Mm-hmm. And you just want to scream at them to grow faster. So those, you can't, anything with a slow veg really is kind of back to like the 13-week sativas. It's kind of also can take it out.
Do you see a correlation with slow veg, fast flower? Have you noticed that at all?
I guess in the past I have. Yeah, I guess I have. Yeah.
It's a weird one. Yeah, they can get done in like, if you're really crop steering, like 7 weeks kind of thing. And the other thing too about like fast finishing plants, it seems really attractive, but in a commercial facility when you have production and all of a sudden half the room is ready a week or two early, it's really not a benefit unless you have a dedicated room for 7 weekers, 8 weekers, 9 weekers.
Or dedicated cure rooms that you can fill as well. But
they tend to bottleneck and create unnecessary challenges. So sometimes when people are like, oh, I got this really fast flowering cultivar, I'm like, well, that's really cool for you maybe, but like commercially, unless there's a dedicated room or flow for it, it tends to create more negatives than benefits, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I mean, back to that 9-week, that 63-day sweet spot, that's kind of really what helps us out the most.
So when you're looking for what a lot of people will call a keeper or a selected phenotype that quote unquote checks all the boxes, what are those boxes and what are those traits that you're looking for in a cultivar? You mentioned some of them.
Yeah, well, so like personally, I've always grown for flavor in Colorado, and ever since, if it didn't taste good, it didn't matter to me. And so personally, that's what I look for. And so, weed should taste good. So that's what we've always said. It's what we've always lived by. So my personal number one would be flavor. But taking my grower hat off and putting the Culta hat on, it is, production viability. And if it's resistant to, powdery mildew, botrytis, any other of the multitude of things that could hit you. So unfortunately, the other one is potency. Potency is a driving force, I think, in many markets right now.
Every market, every state I go to, every country, that is what is driving sales.
Yeah.
Right or wrong.
That's another unfortunate part is we've found very many phenotypes of amazing genetics that, didn't test above a certain amount of THC and therefore just really wasn't coveted in the market. And so not only is it difficult to find keepers that you want to, keep in your production facility forever, we've had to get rid of certain ones that checked every box except, it could have had 3 or 4% more potency or 7% more potency or whatever it is. And, that's the saddest part, I would say, of a pheno hunt is going through all that work to find a strain that
it's like 23 or 22%.
Yeah, what I always say is I always pay attention to my growers. Like if we have a new strain and you walk in and they're all around it, all smelling it and all talking about it in the hallways. You're like, that's how you start to know. It's like, okay, the guava lava, that one is going to be the next one, or like this,
I smelled that one earlier. It had a lot of layers of flavor. It's interesting how good cannabis is just no longer almost acceptable by the general public, and it has to be like great or phenomenal cannabis from their eyes. The sad thing is I mean, you've had stuff tested. Did I hear 40% earlier?
39.8
Total cannabinoids?
THCA. The total cannabinoids was 44.6, I think, for the Amnesia OG. So
Amnesia.
yeah, I mean, we were the first people to hit the 40 number in Maryland.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was. So I went to the Cannabis Cup in 2003, and the strain that won that year was the Hawaiian Snow, and it had tested at 23%, and everybody, the entire city was screaming that it was fake.
That was 2003 in Amsterdam, the original.
Yeah, the High Times Cannabis Cup, and so in 19 years, it's gone from 23% is fake. There's no way that's physically possible. 19 years, and we've basically doubled the THC potential in cannabis. So that's as fast as of an evolution as you could get.
The same story is true on the CBD side. So at one point, because a lot of the operators didn't have access to lab testing, and the only way you tested stuff back in the day was you smoked it, and you were like, "Yep, that's a strong one," or like, "Oh, that's weak." And I remember in my earlier days, we were some of the first people in the country in Colorado, along with you, to have access to lab testing. And it was really exciting. But before that, yeah, we would use our nose and our lungs and how we felt. And as you know, cannabis is such a unique experience for each individual that just because I feel this way, it could totally affect you totally differently. So something like that kind of happened with CBD nationally. So when we first started access to third-party independent lab testing like you have here in Maryland, we were like sort of looking at these, the ones that we were going to throw away, we're like, oh, it's not a keeper. Yeah. We got to test it, and we're like, oh, it has an elevated CBD content. Huh, that's interesting. But prior to that, if you think about breeding traditionally, breeders were basically driven by growing things that were in high demand from their clients wherever they may have been located back in the day. And if you put out a product that didn't get you high, technically, the grower was going to get feedback on that like, hey, like that sucks. Like I don't want any more of that. Yeah. So my theory on the whole thing is because there wasn't access to third-party independent lab testing, a lot of the original breeders, when they would come across something that was CBD rich or a 1-to-1 like your award-winning mango, they didn't grow it anymore. So
because it went over their heads, it was non-detectable, I guess.
So we almost basically the breeders almost accidentally bred CBD completely out of cultivars. And then through discovery of certain things, and like the cherry was kind of like one of the staples for CBD in Colorado that then was a backbone for cherry wine and all this other stuff. Yeah. And I think that original work was done out of Holland from the CBD crew. They had something called a Z6 or Z7 or something like that. But the same thing is now happening again, where now THC is the name of the game, and it's every state. It's not just Maryland. Yeah. And so now the breeders' focus is kind of shifting that direction, and we are seeing what I'll call extreme THC levels north of 32, 35%, and it's like a whole different kind of cannabis compared to maybe when your parents were, in college or something like that.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's not even in the same realm.
For people that are maybe new to Maryland or maybe just got their medical card, what are some of the strains that Culta is really proud of and would encourage people to kind of make sure you try this kind of thing?
Almost 5 years in, the two strains that we have been growing the longest and that we're most proud of and most well known for, I would say, for the full time of Culta would be the Do-si-do 2222 and the Poochie Love. Both two very, very different genetics. Both of them are bred by Archive Seed Bank.
Shout out to Fletcher.
Yeah, Fletcher is definitely one of the heroes. But the Do-si-do 22, I would say, for at least the first few years, was the most talked about strain, no question, in the state. Was always put up there with the best of the best.
And nobody has your genetics except for you in the state of Maryland.
Yeah, and that's kind of another part, like, of the the limited licensing and stuff. For the first few years, no grows shared genetics. There not that we were sharing them, but nobody had the same genetic. Everybody that was offering something was the only grow to do that. And in the last couple of years, there's been a couple strains that have come and gone into other grows, and now we're able to prove that maybe we do grow this strain better than that person. There was never a comparison in the state to say, like, oh,
who's the best grower
actually is growing this better. So just as genetics kind of mature and more people are kind of bringing in certain things to their portfolio, that is kind of the cool thing that we're able to prove is But at the same time, I would say primarily most grows are working with their own genetics.
I agree with that, though. Same genetics, different conditions, different approaches. Who grows it the best? Yeah. In terms of visual appeal, nose, and total cannabinoids.
Yeah, and so that's something that Maryland's the patients here finally kind of have their choice between the companies, and I think it's the same in every state. But in Maryland, people are big fans of certain companies for certain reasons, and really don't like certain brands for certain reasons, whatever that may be. And this will like being able to offer different genetics or the same genetics that other people will have that they're fans of, maybe that can get them out of their comfort zone and say, like, oh, you know what, maybe that company isn't as bad for whatever reason I thought, and they're actually growing amazing genetics and amazing medicine. So
it's nice to have some competition that's doing different stuff, but I do appreciate when there's, let's see who's really putting this out at the highest level. How much insight and involvement did you have in like equipment selection?
So, a lot of that, the selection is done, with Bickle, Matt Bickle, Luke Batten, Bickle Consulting. But it's really, it's me, them, our CEO. We kind of get together. We've had a lot of experience with different facilities, different technologies and equipment. And so that's another good thing about Bickle being involved in multiple states is, they're learning lessons, at an even more rapid rate than we are at certain things. And so we're able to use that relationship to kind of gain knowledge as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. What are some of the key characteristics or traits that they look for when selecting an equipment vendor?
I mean, obviously it's a good product. It functions in the way it should, but really what we're finding after years and years and years, it's really about the relationship building and the having our back, when if anything is to go wrong, that's really what we found creates that solid relationship, no matter what. And so obviously, like I said, it's got to be a great product, but if you back it up and are you have a good word and you're there for us, we'll keep moving that way.
I'm completely in alignment there. It's like I expect your product to do what you claim it does, but like when I have a problem, I don't want it to be crickets. There's a lot of new companies that come into the cannabis space, and they kind of have this mentality of like, we're going to global dominate or take over, and they learn really quickly that this industry is a bit challenging. Operators get delayed for all kinds of different reasons. Sometimes HVAC or racking or lighting, and they're like, yeah, we're going to order it in June, and then they come up with a bunch of bumps in the road with local municipalities or not enough power in a lot of cases, and delay. And all of a sudden they realize that a sales cycle on a piece of equipment could be a year or two, and a lot of people aren't used to that from other industries in terms of like equipment sales and things like that. So and for me, I agree. It's like when I have a problem and I make that phone call, I'm just expecting you to remedy it as fast as you possibly can. And then I'm hoping that you are a well-established company because the equipment vendors, they seem to have a symbiotic relationship with the industry, and the industry's gone through ebbs and flows, so to speak, and booms and then furrows as well. And so, I remember there was a lot of lighting companies initially that I thought were really big players, and some of them aren't around anymore.
I mean, there's multiple. Yeah, I just saw Gavita's at least getting out of the double-ended bulb. Lux, obviously, they went down. There's a lot of companies that are putting out really crazy claims too.
I'm trying to think. Illumitech, do you remember Illumitech?
Yeah.
I have a grow that my friend runs, and they were on their phase 2, and they went to go. They're like, all right, we need lights, and it's like that company doesn't even exist. Yeah. Or you have a failure on it's things fail, whether it's racking or fans or lighting. Like there's going to be things that break, but when that time comes, you don't think about this in other industries, but in our industry, you have to be like, are they still a company? Especially with everything that's going on with the supply chain and the economy in the last few years, it's really weaned out a lot of people that didn't have financial stability underneath them.
Yeah, and that's also something I can kind of tell after working with a company or talking to people if they, really got their stuff in a row the way that they act like they do. Just sending emails back and forth, you can kind of gauge a company's professionalism that way too. And so a lot of people kind of show if they're even worthy of moving forward with before even get too deep into them.
When you guys first elected for the Pip Horticulture system, racking and trays, it was what you guys started talking to us in 2017.
That's when we first started. So we put up our first kind of the proof of concept rack system in 2019. Next door in the one kind of open space we had in veg. So coming from Colorado where I had done and worked on them before, I knew that was going to be the move, but we kind of needed to prove it. And so that was the first very mini system. But then in 2020, that's when this side of the facility was, constructed.
And 2020, we did not have our Elevate platform catwalk system out then. Yeah. So how were you guys accessing the second tier at that time?
The main way we would do it is with picker lifts, like a single person lift that would go in. It's not a large system, but it's
really for picking boxes off of.
Yeah, at Amazon. Yeah, exactly. And so it fits perfectly within the rows. It allows us to get up and down very easily, but it's bulky. It's a heavy piece of equipment that you need to be safe on. Whereas the Elevate is as easy of a system to to put in and install, to move around. But as you saw earlier, we had 9 different people, I think, on one rack. Yeah, 5 and 4, on each side. And so that was the other problem with the lifts, is they were so wide that you could only work one aisle at a time. So
a slow productivity in terms of.
And then they're so large, they cover those aisles that you can only have one in front and one in back. And if the person behind you need to leave, so there's so many different reasons why that's not a viable system. So yeah, for the first year, and obviously we have the moving stair ladders too, but that's good for one person, and you gotta.
They're bulky. The turns and your main aisle have to be wide enough where you can't even make the turn in. That's kind of I got started on some of those, and I was like, yeah, this is okay, but it's the amount of up and down too is a little bit rough.
Well, then you're kind of like standing sideways on a stair and leaning over. There's really not a way to comfortably do it. I mean, growing, if you're a grower, you are used to being in weird, weird shapes and weird positions, but still, anything we can do to keep our, growers out of those weird positions, we will. And the Elevate's been a huge boost with that.
Nice. I mean, even in the short time we were here, there was a bunch of people loaded up behind us, and they've completed their tasks and they're gone. Which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, they've gone through and defoliated, maybe not the whole top, but looks like at least half for the day, and knock the rest out tomorrow.
Yeah, awesome.
Yep.
What does the future look like for Culta? What's next? You guys, we didn't talk about tissue culture, so I got to come back to that too.
Well, the referendum for recreational use just passed here, and so we're kind of sitting here very patiently waiting for all of the, regulations to get presented to us. We have an idea on what to expect, but we are not 100%, and so we're really hoping that July 1st of 2023 is the first day. That's when the referendum comes into effect, but we're hoping that that's also the first day of recreational sales.
Is that just a separate metric tag that they're going to do for you? Or are they going to allow you to transfer over med product?
I believe they're going to transfer it over. From my understanding, it's going to be different than Colorado or other states that use metric, where you have your blue tag and your yellow tag, and you have your separate points of sales, and it's almost a completely separate area in your store. To my understanding, and like I said, we still have a lot to go, that the only difference will really be at the point of sale at the register. If you're a medical patient, you're gonna you'll pay your medical prices. If you're a recreational patient, you'll pay your taxes. In Maryland, they don't tax medicine, so that's where the big difference will be there. I know, like every recreational, there'll be large tax increase.
Are they talking about different caps on edible milligram strength on medical versus adult use or recreational?
Those specifics are definitely being talked about, and we're patiently waiting. Canopy restrictions, they're kind of figuring that out on what percentage increase from an existing space you can go. Coming from Colorado, the edible milligram size has always been a massive point of concern, and so that I'm sure will be part of the whole deal. We're still a 10 milligram 10 piece, or
100 milligram total. That's pretty typical.
Pretty typical. There's I think one producer here that can produce stronger than that, but we're pretty standard, I think, with everybody after the lessons learned in other states.
Well, it's tough too, because on the medical side, like certain people with edibles, like 100 milligrams for me, I'll sleep for a day and a half. I'm like a 20 to 30 milligram kind of person functionally. But, I know other people, it's like they'll eat 100 milligrams and be like, yeah, I kind of feel it. And I'm like,
those guys? I don't eat edibles too often because of that.
It's not cost effective as a medicine if you have to ingest a bar of chocolate that costs, I don't know, $27, $30.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do like the edibles for the sleep aspect for sure, but with my metabolism and the way that my body chemistry goes, I'm just not I'm not the target edible user.
Right. Yeah. But I think Colorado's 1,000 milligrams on the edible side, in the medical side.
Medically, I believe so. Yeah.
And it's priced reasonably too. You're like, oh, okay, that's only $40.
Yeah. When I was first managing the stores in Denver, we were able to sell a 100 milligram chunk of chocolate that big, and that was when the lessons were learned.
The old Chiba Chews and Blue Kadoos and all that stuff.
And the Mary's Medicinals and all the baked goods, but then instead of having one cookie, you had to have 10 mini cookies in there, and so that same dosage, I think, is now going to be just regular.
I think it's something that MSOs probably really struggle with. Is it's like, okay, great, you have all these operations in all these states, but you can't exactly standardize everything, because the local municipality, the states, they may have different, I don't call it hoops to jump through, but they may have different regulations that modify and adjust your workflow based on compliance.
Yeah, I mean, compliance, we live and die by compliance here, obviously. I mean, that's what we say. We're a weed company, but we're basically a compliance company. Without being compliant, we're not going to grow a plant. And so, that's kind of just you got to kind of look at everything from that view.
Something that I read about you guys that I really liked, it resonated really well with me. It was something like, if we won't smoke it, we don't want to put it out there, or something like that.
Yeah, we won't put anything out there that we wouldn't smoke ourselves. I would hope that's a.
It sounds like a logical and simple thing, but as you know already, there's many people that work at dispensaries who will go to a different dispensary to buy their product, and I go, "But don't you work at a dispensary?" And they go, "Yeah, but I don't like our product, or I won't smoke our product."
It's like a Wendy's, burger guy going to McDonald's, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
So.
The first thing I want to say is thank you. You guys have been really gracious with your time. I've learned a lot. It's been a pleasure to see how ambitious you guys were with some of your ideas, but most importantly, there's a lot of ambitious people out there, but your collective team's ability to execute, and then to be able to tie in a really strong culture. We talk about cannabis culture as like a legacy type thing coming into the fold, but the collectiveness that I see both in the legacy market and in the legal market around culture is respect for the plant and the people around the plant. And you guys have done an incredible job on both of those. So just want to hats off to you guys.
Thanks, I appreciate it, and definitely it's good that the hard work is showing itself, and that the smiles on the growers and the energy that we exude is noticeable. So
if you could give one message to let's say a listener that maybe is an existing grower, or maybe an aspiring grower, maybe even a home grower, or not a grower at all, what would that message be in terms of kind of what success looks like in the cannabis space? Essentially, what does it take to be successful in the licensed and legal and compliant cannabis space?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no matter what size, if you're in a closet or in a facility 10 times the size, education is key. I've been doing this for 18 years now at this point, and every single day I'm learning something new. So never stop trying to get better, for one, and it's not easy. What we've been doing here in the 5 years, it's not an easy task to accomplish, and so don't get discouraged. Stick to the path. Know that you're here for a reason, and your hard work will pay off. And get with the program, dig in, learn it, and good things will come.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. I look forward to coming back when adult use is here, so I can try some of these beautiful flowers. But it was great to appreciate them visually, and we look forward to the next time we connect.
Awesome.
All right, brother.
Thanks for listening to Cultivation Elevated. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at piphorticulture.com/podcast. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and a review at ratethispodcast.com/cultivation elevated. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.